Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a Wednesday talk. It is July 1st, and I will say just right at the top of this, for those of you who are curious, I am going to do my retreat in the second 2 weeks of July. So we will have 2 more full weeks of Nowhere Village before I take a little break, and then we'll be back together in August. And in the meanwhile, I'm putting together some things so you guys have plenty to work on over those 2 weeks. I am going to give a talk today offering a teaching that I've never given before, though it integrates elements of teachings that I have been giving. And I just realized, hold on. Okay. And so this teaching that I'm about to give is, in a sense, a rough draft, a work in progress. And in a way, they always are, because I'm always learning and growing my awareness and my understanding. There are pieces that come in and pieces that fall away as I make my offerings. But yeah, this is a little bit new, and I'm still working with the language around how I offer it. And so thank you for being here with me as we venture into something a little bit different. The themes that I teach about are always the same, and the core practice of meditation and growing our awareness and our ability to be present with whatever is arising on its own, that stays the same. That's the basic the basics of what I teach, and those don't really change. And you'll recognize a lot of the language that I'm offering and a lot of the teachings from the Yoga Sutras that I've been integrating. I'll go ahead and start by just saying, so last week I talked about how sukha, which means pleasure or ease, comfort, especially in the context of what's going on in the world, we could actually also use the word privilege to talk about sukha. Now it's a little bit, hopefully that'll make more sense as you go in. But sukha is that experience of ease, comfort. Things are all okay for me. And dukkha is a Sanskrit word that's often paired with sukha, which means pain, discomfort, dis-ease. Things aren't going great for me right now in this moment. But we talked about how, rather than seeing these as these two opposites, if we want to come to truth and all of the balance and harmony that come from truth, all of the health that comes from truth, if we really look at it, we realize that sukha and dukkha actually are really kind of two sides of one experience, the experience of getting information from our body, the experience of, I gave the example of the digestive cycle, where in some parts of that cycle, it might feel like dukkha, it might feel painful, especially if you go a long time before you can find food, for instance. Though being hungry is not the only part of that cycle that can feel uncomfortable. Not nearly, right? And there's a similar pair that we find when we are exploring the obstacles to meditation, right? So sukha and dukkha come up not as obstacles to meditation in the Yoga Sutras. They come up as just experiences that we have. The suffering is caused when we're attached to our sukha, when we're very attached to our comforts And look, it's kind of in the nature of our comforts to make us feel a little attached, isn't it? And here's where maybe you can start to see the way that the concept of privilege can fit in here. There's nothing wrong with sukha, and there's actually nothing wrong with privilege. Where we get into suffering for ourselves, and suffering for ourselves always means suffering for others too, that are around us, is when we get attached, which means we get afraid. I get afraid that my comforts are going to be taken away. That's suffering in the Yoga Sutras. That's suffering in Buddhism as well. Now, there's another way we can have suffering, of course, and this is the way that we talk about a lot more often, which is dukkha, pain, discomfort. And he actually uses the same word for both. He says basically you can get stuck in sukha, or you can get stuck on your dukkha. Either way, it's suffering. Not one isn't necessarily better than the other. Either way, you're not in your truth and you're not in health. But of course, with dukkha, the stuckness really usually comes about more as aversion, like avoiding it, right? And so you could see in the example that I gave last week that if I always want to feel, full, if that sukha, that comfort of fullness, is something I'm very attached to, that can lead to problems, right? And otherwise, if I have a situation where I've decided I'm very attached to the feeling of feeling empty or skinny, right? Again, sickness. We just get sick. We get sickness on either side. One isn't necessarily a worse sickness than the other. Overeating versus anorexia, right? What we want instead is to be able to have awareness of the cycle. And I'm just using digestion as an example. It's really any of our physiological cycles. What we want is to be able to be aware and to be able to ride these cycles out and not get stuck at any point. So there's another pair that we learn about, which is punya and apunya. And these are often translated as virtue and vice, being good or being bad, right? On the kind of ethical level, social level, rather than the kind of physiological level that sukha and dukkha talk about, right? Now, just with sukha and dukkha, where we get into trouble, where we get suffering isn't from the sukha or the dukkha. It's from how we relate. You guys remember the phrase chitta vritti from the beginning of the Yoga Sutras? These are basically our ideas about stuff, what we think about stuff, how we label things, and then how we relate to it. It's not the thing itself. The feeling of fullness is just a feeling of fullness. The association of that with positivity, right? With our lives being good. That's a story. Okay, so same with punya and apunya, actually. And I gave you the digestive process as the example for the four physiological sukha and dukkha. I'll give you the example of for punya and apunya, the learning process. Look at somebody who's learning how to walk. Is it apunya? Apunya means we didn't do a good job. We failed. Is it apunya? Is it a failure when the baby falls? No, he's going to fall more than he's going to walk at first. That is Again, it's punya and apunya, the failure and success, right? Oh, I took a step. Success. Absolutely, right? I fell, right? That wasn't taking a step. That wasn't what I came here to do necessarily, but it actually was a part of that process. And so the suffering comes from our stories about things. Those stories become identities, so that we start to think, oh, this is me, this is me. And then we start relating in certain ways. We start relating with raga and devesha, as it's called, right? We start relating by clinging to our sukha and pushing away our dukkha. And then here we are in this state of fear. And when we're in that state of fear, relating to anything, anyone, it doesn't work so well. Okay. So now I'm going to offer this teaching. I just needed to get us a little caught up on that stuff. So this is something that's been kicking around in my reality for a while, and see if you can see it here. And some of you maybe have seen this before. It's usually called the drama triangle, and this is about these identities that we can get stuck in. I'm actually not sure where this originally came from, but it's been bumping around again in my world for a long time. I've seen it a lot of different places and never actually seen it originally attributed, but I could find out. So at the top of this triangle, you'll see the hero or the savior, the perpetrator, and is on the other side. And it's as if it feels like as if these two have the power, and then there's the victim. And what this is all about is the idea that we get stuck in these identities, we get stuck in these dynamics, and that these dynamics actually create each other. So as long as I'm a victim, I tend to have in my world a perpetrator or an enemy, someone that I blame for the bad stuff. And I tend to have a hero or some heroes. I tend to have, whether they're other beings or maybe they're my practices, or I tend to have things in my world that are my saviors, that I blame, that I attribute, that I hold accountable in terms of what's good in my world. And what's interesting about this dynamic, of course, is that it is a dynamic, and that as long as we're playing any role on the triangle, or we're trying to put someone else in any role in the triangle, we're actually creating a situation that's basically inescapable. It's inevitably going to have drama. It's inevitably going to be unresolvable, actually, from inside of this framework. And I'm happy to talk more about this, and yeah, we're going to dive more into all of it. But I actually the newness of the teaching is that I had this revelation just yesterday, actually, kind of been waiting to break through, but I had this revelation that in order to sync this up with the teachings of the Yoga Sutras that we've been working on, and honestly, the teachings that have been most helpful for me lately, I'm actually going to turn this triangle into a square. And then we're going to talk more about these different dynamics and how it all works. Okay, so don't worry if you're not quite sure what I meant by the drama triangle or what's going on there. I'm going to go deeper. So we'll use the same language for now, though. I'm working on some different language for these. So we got the hero, and we got the perpetrator, and we've got the victim. Okay, so I'm going to fill in that fourth corner here in a second. But otherwise, we've got the triangle again here. We're just going to add on this little corner. And The hero. The hero. This is one that, well, I play all of them actually, but this is one that my public persona often gets stuck on. The one who fixes it, the one who makes it better, the one who's always kind, right? I talked a few weeks ago about my false value of niceness, right? Talking about the hero role is just another way to explore what I was talking about then. Yes, of course, it's great to help people. But there's a way that we can help people that empowers them, that reminds them that they have everything inside that they need. And there's a way that we can help people that actually keeps them in the victim place. And this is really hard to look at. And this is something that's coming up in the race discussions. This is something that's been coming up for me as a sore point for a long time with my brethren of other, well-educated, relatively privileged, liberal identifying people who, in the way in which they want to help others, actually end up keeping the others othered. So this is something to really explore. And just like when we talked about false values, this is hard. It's hard to do this self-looking, but to say, am I swooping in to help because it's actually going to empower that person, because it's actually going to help them rise? Or am I swooping in to help because by doing this, it makes me feel powerful? The hero in that moment has an identity of punya. Right? I was talking about good deeds. I'm the bringer of goodness. Right? And so this is the missionary who comes in, good intentions. We have to stay really sweet with ourselves as we do this, okay? It's totally okay. Good intentions, But when we really look at what the ramifications are from the way that we're helping, when we really look at our deeper intentions, it's important to be able to see the victim can also get very stuck. I do this too. I've had a really hard couple of years and I can get really stuck in this place. It's a way of grasping at power to stay in the victim, right? The one who is suffering. And there's a kind of power there, right? Because it's like I have an identity, I have a role at least. It feels familiar. And from that victim place, I can hope for the hero to come in and solve all my problems. Here's another benefit of staying in victim. I can convince myself that I'm never to blame for anything bad happening. I can always other, right? So in every role, we're othering the other. We're othering the victim. We're othering the hero. We're othering the perpetrator, right? Depending on where we stand. And again, figuring out for yourself when you're in these places, the victim feels really disempowered. Are you getting something out of feeling disempowered? Maybe. And then the perpetrator is an interesting one, but we do this to ourselves all day long too, and to others, right? This is when we say, okay, it's his fault. That's the fault. And it's a kind of scapegoating of the blame, right, of the situation. This is a scapegoating of the goodness of the situation. And this is a scapegoating of the suffering, when in fact, or the suffering, the whole thing is suffering. The whole thing is suffering. Everybody's suffering, actually. But pain, discomfort. The victim's in discomfort. The victim's in need of help. So the problem is not necessarily, sometimes we all experience some version of these roles at different times. The problem is when we're in the dynamic in a way that's hardened that makes us push others to these other corners. And then the victim never figures out that the hero lives inside. The victim never takes responsibility, right? The hero doesn't know how to do anything but be the hero. And so when they burn out, or when, whatever happens, often they'll flip into perpetrator, right? Either for the victim or for themselves. Make sense? I've had a tendency to be in relationships with people who had the hero complex as well. And I gotta say, two heroes always trying to save each other, leads to a lot of inauthenticity. Okay, so let's go for the fourth corner. I don't know what to name it, but we're just gonna call them the privileged here in this other corner. The one who's attached to pleasure, the one who's attached to pain, the one who's attached, the perpetrator, right? I should just listening. I realize some people just listen to these. The perpetrator, I'm like pointing at this board. The perpetrator, right, gets attached and identified with apunya, the bringer of all the bad. Hero gets attached to punya, the bringer of all the good. And so, this person, the perpetrator, is always receiving all the blame. The hero is receiving all the praise. The victim is stuck in this place of pain, and the privileged is in this place of sukha. And if the comfort doesn't feel genuine, right, we often will just go for more pleasure, go for more. I don't feel very good, right? Give me more pleasure, when often that's actually not the way. And so how do we exit this square of suffering? What I'm going to offer next, I've decided I'm going to make a little template for you guys. I might get it done this week, or I might just offer it for the inquiry for next week, because we'll keep diving into these themes next week. But I'm basically going to offer you a little template that you might be able to really use, actually, as you prepare for having difficult conversations, as you look toward your various relationships and try to untangle some of these pieces and get everybody back into wholeness, right? Because the truth of the matter is, we all experience sukha and dukkha. We all experience and are responsible for punya and apunya. And look, once you're self-realized, you're on your way. Once you're self-realized means you realize that you are responsible for so much of your reality. And so it's really empowering. Whoa, I have all this power around my reality. Power always has to come with responsibility. So it's also a responsibility as we become self-realized, right? We become more accountable. As you do that, you'll start to see what Nisargadatta says, what all my teachers say, that it's all within you, that you are the source. And so as you become self-realized, all of this work in a way happens just inside with the parts of the self, and then gets expressed. Meanwhile, we are social creatures, and meanwhile, we are very much in the world. And meanwhile, until you're self-realized and totally self-empowered and self-accountable, others will have a lot of power over you. So getting back into right relationship with those around us. It's a phrase I use a lot. This suffering square is basically a simple diagram of not right relationship. So getting back into right relationship with those around you is, it is how we heal our world. Okay, so the template for working with this, okay, for unwinding this, is to take another teaching from the Yoga Sutras that we've been working on, and those who meditated today, we actually did this, a version of this, okay? And we're going to go backwards through them. Because they, so the first one is, okay, so you can use this template that I'm going to give you guys as you prepare for a difficult conversation, or as you just work with difficult feelings coming up for yourself. And the first thing that we cultivate is equanimity. It's called upeksha in Sanskrit. And that's for the part of the self or the aspect of the other that we feel like is wrong, right? Apunya. We do need to be able to call out parts of the self and hold them accountable, right? Can we do this without blame? Can we do this without shame? Maybe is a better way to put it, right? Can we do this without making this person feel like they're totally responsible for all the problems in the world? Okay, so if I'm encountering, for instance, a racist relative, can I come into that with equanimity and say, you know, if I step back, like, this is just another human being on this planet full of human beings that are still undoing this conditioning. It doesn't mean I have to come in and blow smoke up their ass and pretend they're a hero. It doesn't mean that I have to treat them like a victim. And it doesn't mean that I need to it doesn't mean that I need to in any way sort of keep bolstering their sense of comfort. And yet, with equanimity, we're not attacking anybody. With equanimity, we're understanding, like, I'm not going to pretend that you are totally to blame for all the problems in our country. That's not true. You know, I'm going to keep that spaciousness. And we need to, be able to accept, right, that this person may not have an understanding of what they've done wrong yet. We may not totally have an understanding, and that's really important. So I often say that the beginning of equanimity is, I don't know. I don't know, actually. I don't totally understand everything. And equanimity is also about recognizing, really, a lot of this. Maybe I should have said this at the top. Expressing our truth to each other has everything to do with being able to recognize one another as autonomous beings who everybody you meet has their own journey, and you don't totally understand what that journey is about. You're not supposed to. That's not your job. And so equanimity is a version of we're giving back their experience to them. And we can also sit and say, I reckon, you know, so you could say, I can recognize all of that. And yet there's something going on here that feels like apunya to me, which means it feels to me like something's a little bit off. And I'm going to speak up about that. Hopefully coming from this place of equanimity. Now, Um, Now, if you're going into a conversation where that's this person is displaying apunya, right? It's a challenging way to start a conversation. But again, if we can begin with that equanimity piece and prepare ahead of time, and be able to use your touchstones, right? Use your meditation practice, be able to find your way back home when you feel yourself getting out of equanimity. It's possible. Celebration, or mudita, joy is actually usually how it's translated. But this person that you're speaking to also has done good things, believe it or not. And when we're having a difficult conversation with someone and someone is already feeling like a perpetrator, already feeling like the scapegoat, already feeling like the repository of all the blame, they rightly, something inside says, fuck that. I'm not just, this. I've done all these good things. And you'll see this coming up a lot, right? You'll see people getting called out for something and saying, but I did this good thing. That's natural. And so what we can do in the way that we relate to people is to get ahead of that. And before we start doing this whole like brutal call out cancel culture, which I'm a fan of in a lot of ways. Like, I'm all about speaking the truth. But if we are able to say, I saw this thing you did, it was really great. I appreciate this about you. I appreciate this, right? If I can go ahead and celebrate something genuinely, none of this wants to be false. It just doesn't get us out. Find it genuinely. Because here's another thing, right? To fake it is a form of gaslighting. Like, I say, oh my gosh, that was great. And then maybe somebody goes, you didn't like it, did you? And I go, oh, no, I liked it. I'm lying. And their gut instinct was to call me on it, right? Their gut instinct, they said, this person isn't being honest with me. And to save my own niceness, right? Or whatever, my own self-image, I shut down their intuition. I tell them it was wrong. They misread their gut, knowing they didn't. And I know it's again one of these really simple forms of it that many of us do all day long. I'm really trying not to do it anymore, and it can be hard. But can you find something that you can genuinely say, I'm proud of you for that, man. Thank you. I see that is a contribution to the goodness in the world. And I personally believe, I really do, I really believe this. Every single person has contributed something beautiful. And every single person has contributed something shitty too. Just going to stop shoving each other into these corners and acting like anyone here is just one of these things, or that anyone here can't be all of them. The victim, compassion, right? For the one who is experiencing dukkha. Compassion is naturally arising. Everybody has it. Many of us have had to shut down our ability to empathize because of the world we live in and because of our training and conditioning, men especially, in our gendered world, right? I find And then they feel like I'm a monster. I don't have this. You do. You absolutely do. It just got very disconnected. It's in there. And then, because I want to wrap this up and we can go deeper into all this, I want to talk more about it all next week too. Now this is friendliness. I'm not into the word privilege. It's not working for me, but you get the idea. Okay, so this is the person who's experiencing sukha, joy, pleasure. I know for me, right? I've gone through a hell of a couple of years. These last few months have been really hard. I've had moments where I saw other people who seemed like they'd gotten what they needed, and they had a little family to like go into quarantine with, and their careers kind of like actually were like stable, and I see these things, and there could be a temptation sometimes to resent it. But me doing that doesn't actually get me any more of what I thought I wanted. I don't actually know if just because others have wealth or connections or all the things that we could associate with privilege, right? Just because things look like they're going okay for other people doesn't mean that they're happy. And again, it's a teaching in the Yoga Sutras that the attachment to pleasure, right? There's so many examples of this throughout all of the traditions, really, and fables and fairy tales about it, right? What happens when we just get more and more comfort and privilege? We don't necessarily get happier. We don't necessarily know how to appreciate it. And so again, we don't want to push somebody into a corner and say, okay, you have all this privilege, you have all this comfort, you have all this stuff I want, or others, you should share it, or whatever. Besides the bloody 1%, or some people that like it's really, really absurd, and you could actually really help the planet out if you just gave some of that away. Like most of the people that any of us know in our world, we don't actually want to take anything from them. We actually want to be really friendly toward that, knowing that when we're friendly toward these comforts, the beings who seem to possess them are going to be friendly back. Obviously, this is a really important place to look out for ourselves. And again, this is a place where I lived a lot before my divorce. I remember kind of seeing other people around who didn't have what I have, and feeling a little like they might want what I have, and they might resent me. And it made me back off. It made me less friendly. And that was because I was feeling really attached to what I had. Don't take my stuff. Don't take my husband. Don't take my nice house. Don't take all this away from me. It mostly got taken, not by other people, but by my journey, by spirit, by a bigger purpose. But my attachment to all of it didn't ever help. That's why it had to be taken, I think. All right. I think that this is pretty good. It's pretty good for today. I'll just kind of wrap this up by saying, I'm going to again give you guys like a little template that like walk you through this. Like, okay, I'm approaching a difficult situation. I'm going to cultivate equanimity for this person, celebration for this person, compassion, right, for the parts of them that are suffering, because everybody has pain. And I'm gonna get really clear that I'm not an enemy of somebody's comforts, right? That we all experience all of this. And that I am able to, once I can do some of this work and give other people back to their journey and give myself back to my journey, a container is created where we can share our truths openly, lovingly, where we can see that because we have a shared world, we have to share our truths with each other. And destroying another being doesn't ever help truth. You could eliminate anybody that you saw as a perpetrator, and because of the dynamic, because of the way that we're relating and seeing the world, somebody else will step into that role. It's the dynamics, right? It's not the individuals. People are people. People are people, but dynamics can be sick, unhealthy. And everything that's sick can be healed. Okay. Any questions? I have a good one from Sveta here. Great square, Aaron. The privilege is the beneficiary, silent bystander. I seem to be dealing with a lot of people in that category and can be there myself as well. Yep. This is great. Where can we brush up on the friendliness, equanimity, etc.? I recall there was a meditation about it, which I loved. Was it in some part of the coordinates? Okay, great. Good question. I'm actually going to give it to you guys again as its own template. It's not in the coordinates. Actually, during the coordinates, I did give a talk about it, and I can direct you to that too. We've talked about it a couple of times. It's not specifically always a part of the coordinates the way that I teach them. But I think I did bring it in. I think I brought it in friendship. I'll find that for you personally. But in terms of everybody else watching, I'm going to create, again, like just a little document for you guys that will help you go through these steps. And I'll get that to you by Monday. It may be our Monday morning inquiry practice. I think that might be the best way. Yeah. Yeah, we met 4 friends and generated those feelings. Yeah, I'll dig all that up for you. Yeah. And this morning's meditation, which you'll get the recording of, we did it for ourselves. And so we're going to keep working on all of this. We'll keep working on it over the next couple of weeks. And then just to answer quickly the question about the beneficiary, the silent bystander. I think that what's the kind of inquiry we're going to end up doing around that, really around all of it, is, what am I getting out of this? And what am I protecting? What am I trying to protect? How is my identity wrapped up in this privilege, in these comforts, in this sukha? Am I really getting what I think I'm getting out of this? And maybe I'll speak to this more next week, but I mean, you guys are now seeing this, like, the inside of this tiny little cabin where I live. And I just went from a place of really, at least trying. I was living out of my means, but I was really trying to be, especially with COVID and everything, but trying to like live this very like comforted, privileged life. And I kind of was telling myself, I've had this really hard year and I just really need to live somewhere that feels really good and cushy. And I need to, it wasn't sustainable. And again, I think that like finding places where we can find sukha and finding, comfort, this is all good. That's all good. It's all good. But it's a very quick little slip of the ego, right? It's a really quick little slip where we go from being where it goes from being self-care to being indulgent. and again, if we can, I think it's just really important. It's not even so much about like, I have more money than I need, or I have more comforts than I need. It's more about, how am I relating to it? Am I attached? Am I living in fear that someone is going to come up and take away some of my comfort from me? Why is that? Okay. So we'll keep digging in, keep digging all of this. Yeah. Okay. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Much, much love. And I'll see you all very soon.